They told us we were alone. For decades, governments, scientists, and media outlets repeated the same refrain. No proof of extraterrestrial life. No evidence of civilizations beyond Earth. Humanity was special, unique, sovereign in a vast and empty cosmos. But what if that message was not ignorance, it was a carefully constructed illusion? A lie so old, so rehearsed, it became part of our collective faith in science and reason. David Chen never intended to be the man to break that illusion. In fact, he lived most of his life as part of the machine that upheld it. For 23 years, he worked for the U.S. Department of Energy as a mechanical engineer, specializing in ventilation systems for classified installations. He was the man they sent when a missile silo's airflow went bad, when nuclear waste facilities required airtight atmospheric controls, when labs experimenting with unmentionable pathogens needed to remain sealed from the outside world. His clearance level was so high he often could not tell his own wife what state he was stationed in. And for over 2 decades, he believed he had seen the darkest corners of America's secret programs. He believed he knew the limits of human deception. But in late November of 2019, Chen's certainty began to unravel. He was summoned for what appeared to be another classified assignment. The briefing materials were as dry and procedural as ever. An atmospheric control issue at a research installation in New Mexico. Fluctuating temperatures, humidity spikes, possible safety hazards. On paper, nothing extraordinary. The kind of thing he would solve dozens of times before. But in his memory, this was not just another assignment. It was the first step into a labyrinth beneath the desert that would alter everything he believed about life, about humanity, and about his own place in history. Chen never liked flying, and the unmarked transport they used that day did not help. It had no windows. The seats faced backwards, as though discouraging any notion of orientation or direction. He was joined by 3 other contractors, strangers who were not allowed to speak. Each clutched sealed briefing packets, flipping through pages of diagrams and redacted notes while the engines droned. Chen told himself it was standard. This was how black site deployments always began. Yet something about the silence in that cabin felt heavier, more deliberate, as though they were not just suppressing communication, but erasing it altogether. When the plane touched down, Chen was met with the facade of normality. Chain-link fences, a guard post, a scattering of beige buildings that could have belonged to any anonymous military installation. But this was Dulce, New Mexico, a town that never made it to government maps, a place erased by bureaucratic omission. On the surface, there was nothing remarkable: desert scrub, mesas baked in sunlight, skies so white it made you feel like an ant. But beneath it, carved into the rock, lay something that could not be mapped, something that should not have been built by human hands alone. Chen introduced himself as he always did, mechanical engineer, Department of Energy, tasked with ventilation. It was his shield, his cover, and the truth all at once. But for the first time, his confidence in the routine began to falter. The man who greeted him was not reassuring. He was Morrison, a government lifer, pale from too many years under fluorescent lights. His handshake trembled as though his nerves had been scraped raw. 2 years stationed here, Morrison muttered when Chen asked. But his voice was hollow, like he was trying to convince himself. Even before Chen saw the deeper facility, he knew something was fundamentally wrong. The truth, however, was still far below them. Before his escort could disappear into the warren of sterile white corridors, before Chen descended into the unending elevator shaft that seemed to swallow him whole, he made himself a promise. If what lay underground was what his instincts already suspected, something beyond protocol, something beyond engineering, then he would keep his eyes open. He would remember every detail. And when the time came, he would tell someone, anyone, even if it cost him everything. My name is David Chen, he would one day whisper into a recording device. And I used to work for the Department of Energy. Used to. That is important, because after what I am about to tell you, I do not work for anyone anymore. I can't. They made sure of that. The desert at night holds its secrets tightly. Dulce was no exception. Chen expected the entrance to this supposed research installation to be like the others: functional, industrial, forgettable. Instead, it felt eerily staged, like a movie set designed to appear dull. The chain-link fences, the prefab structures, even the guards at their posts seemed to belong less to reality and more to a performance meant to distract from the truth beneath the surface. Morrison walked beside him, stiff as a man shackled by invisible chains. He rarely looked up, rarely spoke, except in clipped bursts of acronym-filled government jargon. Chen had worked with people like him before, career men too deep into the classified world to ever resurface. But something about Morrison was different. His skin had a grayish tint, his eyes seemed older than his years, and his hands. They trembled when he thought no one was watching. The elevator was unassuming at first, a set of reinforced doors, keypad access, and a security scanner. It looked like it could have been the freight elevator for any corporate building, but the descent lasted far longer than Chen had ever experienced in any man-made structure. Floor markers slid past 1, 2, 3, then 5. Still they plunged. Morrison stood rigid, eyes fixed on the control panel as though afraid to look anywhere else. The fluorescent light flickered faintly, humming in a rhythm that felt organic, almost like a slow pulse. "How long have you been stationed here?" Chen asked. It was more to break the silence than genuine curiosity. 2 years, Morrison replied, voice dry and flat. Then, after a pause, he added, "You get used to it." But Chen heard the hollowness in that statement. Morrison did not believe his own words. He was rehearsing them, and that realization sent a chill crawling down Chen's spine. At last, the elevator doors opened to reveal Level 6 Chen's assigned base of operations. The corridor stretched outward, sterile and hospital-like. White walls, bright, buzzing strips of fluorescent light. The smell of disinfectant laced with something faintly organic, like soil after rain or the musk of an animal enclosure. It was unnerving not because it was unfamiliar, but because it was almost familiar. Everything was designed to feel safe, controlled, clinical. And yet there was a subtle wrongness that his subconscious caught even if his conscious mind could not name it. Morrison handed Chen a key card and a thick folder of schematics and work orders. Quarters are down this hall. Cafeterias open 24 hours. You are cleared for levels 6 through 9. Any questions about other areas, direct them to site security. How many levels does this facility have? Chen asked. Morrison hesitated. His hand hovered over the elevator call button for a moment too long. His lips parted as if he might answer, but then he closed them again. That is not part of your assignment, Mr. Chen. And just like that, he was gone. Chen walked alone to his quarters. He had lived in countless government-issue rooms before. Narrow beds, bland desks, a chair that looked like it came from a forgotten surplus warehouse. But something here was stranger. The walls were not just thick, they were overbuilt, layered as if to muffle sound or resist pressure from within rather than from outside. And then there was the window, or rather, the painting of a window. On one wall, someone had painstakingly painted a scenic mountain view, complete with curtains. It was laughable at first glance, absurd even. But the longer Chen stared at it, the less funny it became. He realized it was not meant as a joke. Someone had thought this was necessary. Someone had believed that the illusion of a window and echo of normal life would help residents survive the psychological strain of being buried alive. That night, lying in his narrow bed, Chen could not shake the feeling that the painted window was not just for comfort. It was a test, a way to measure how long it took before the mind began to accept the illusion as real. And beneath it all, deep in the walls, Chen felt something else. Not sound exactly, but vibration. A low, almost subsonic hum. Too deep for the ears, but strong enough to rattle the bones. It was like the heartbeat of something vast and hidden, a pulse that seemed to stretch beyond machinery. He wondered if Morrison had gotten used to this, too. He closed his eyes, but the hum remained, steady, rhythmic, whispering a message too old to be human. Morning came without sunlight. In a facility buried this deep, day and night were manufactured cycles fluorescent lights, brightened to a sterile glare at 0600, dimmed to an artificial dusk at 2200. Chun woke not to birdsong or dawn, but to the buzz of electricity in the walls and the endless hum of recycled air. He rubbed the sleep from his eyes, the painted window still glaring at him with its mockery of freedom, and turned his attention to the folder Morrison had left him. The ventilation schematics spread across his desk like arteries in a body. He knew ductwork as intimately as some men knew their children's faces, but the reports here made little sense. Temperature sensors recorded spikes of 30 degrees within minutes. Humidity levels swung wildly as though the air itself was breathing. Maintenance logs insisted the ducts had been cleaned, inspected, tested. Nothing should have been wrong, yet every reading told him otherwise. Even stranger were the departments submitting the work requests. Not laboratory oversight or facilities management as he would expect, but instead chillingly vague names like biological containment and subject management. These were not designations Chun had ever seen in a DOE facility. They sounded more like euphemisms, bureaucratic masks for things best left unnamed. Determined to see the issue firsthand, Chun rode the elevator down to level 7. Immediately, the atmosphere changed. Where level 6 had sterile white walls and buzzing lights, level 7 felt older, more brutal. Bare concrete walls, steel doors, dimmer lighting that stretched shadows into long, twitching shapes. The air was heavier here, warmer, and carried a tang that made Chen's skin crawl. It reminded him of a zoo enclosure, the kind where predators paced behind glass. Organic, humid animal. Yet there were no animals here. At least, none listed on the schematics. He found his first access point halfway down a corridor. Kneeling, he removed the vent cover and shone his flashlight inside. The ductwork looked too clean, as if it had been scrubbed recently, but the airflow readings on his handheld meter were inconsistent. Air surged, then stilled, as if something large was periodically obstructing the flow before moving on. He frowned. No machinery fit that description. No known obstruction behaved that way. Then he heard it. At first, just faint background noise, the normal symphony of a working facility, the drone of distant fans, the whir of machinery, the trickle of human activity in remote corridors. But layered under that, stranger sounds emerged. A soft scraping, like something hard dragging across concrete. A dull thump, irregular, as though massive weight shifted behind walls. And most disturbing of all, a whisper, not words exactly, but something close. Low, sibilant tones that slithered through the ducts, as though the facility itself were murmuring secrets. Chen sat back on his heels, heart thudding. His rational mind offered explanations, distorted echoes, sound traveling unpredictably through concrete and steel, the paranoid tricks of isolation. But even as he told himself this, gooseflesh rose on his arms. His instincts whispered a different truth. The first vent grate he found proved those instincts right. The metal was bent outward, not inward, but outward, as though something inside had forced its way into the corridor. The steel had been twisted, warped with brute strength. Deep gouges raked across the edges, unmistakable claw marks etched into government property. Chun reached out with trembling fingers, tracing one of the grooves. It was deeper than any human hand could make. He snapped a photo with his government-issued device, intending to log it into the maintenance database. But when he attempted to file the report, his credentials failed. Access denied. He tried again, and again. Nothing. According to the system, he did not have clearance to document issues with the very system he had been sent here to repair. That was when realization struck him with the weight of falling stone. He was not here to fix the ventilation system. Not really. He was here to observe, to see something others already knew and perhaps could no longer face. He was being used, and that meant whatever lived in these ducts, whatever bent steel with claws and whispered through vents, was not a malfunction. It was a resident. That night, lying in bed beneath the painted window, Chen's decision hardened. If they would not let him see the truth, he would steal it. He would go where he was not permitted. So at midnight, when the facility dimmed into its red-lit emergency cycle, he swiped his card and returned to level 7. The corridors glowed blood red, shadows deepening into black voids. The strange sounds were louder here in the artificial night. The scraping, the thumping, and something new, a low, resonant hum, almost a purr, as if some vast creature was settling into comfort. He returned to the damaged grate, flashlight trembling in his hand. Leaning close, he shone the beam inside. The scratches were unmistakable. The duct was scored with hundreds of gouges, and at the far end of the tunnel, barely catching the edge of his light, something gleamed. An eye. Golden, unblinking, intelligent. It did not move, didn't blink. It simply stared back at him, ancient and patient. Chen's breath froze in his lungs. Every instinct screamed at him to run, but his body locked. Seconds stretched into eternity before, mercifully, the flashlight wavered, and when he steadied it again, the eye was gone. Only claw marks and darkness remained. Still shaking, Chen pulled away from the vent, every nerve alight with dread. He told himself again that it was stress, isolation, paranoia. But deep inside, he knew the truth. Something was living in those ducts, and it was watching him. The red emergency glow painted everything in hellish tones as Chen crouched near the twisted vent. His heart hammered against his ribs, his flashlight shaking in his hand. He was about to retreat, to force himself back toward the elevator, when another sound joined the scraping and humming in the walls. Footsteps. Measured, deliberate, echoing faintly along the concrete corridor. Not frantic, not hurried, but steady, as though the owner of those steps belonged here, belonged in this subterranean night. Chen killed his flashlight and pressed himself flat against the wall, forcing slow breaths past his clenched teeth. The footsteps grew closer. 20 feet. 15. The glow of a screen flickered ahead, a faint blue halo in the red gloom. A figure emerged. A tall person, wrapped in a white lab coat. At first glance, Chen's mind cataloged them as another scientist, perhaps one of the researchers assigned to these restricted levels. But then the details bled through the too fluid way they moved, the elongated precision of their stride, and the soft blue glow reflecting off a face that seemed wrong, though Chen could not yet place why. The figure raised a tablet in their hands and spoke softly, their voice carrying oddly in the narrow corridor. Subject 7. Nocturnal activity confirmed. Ventilation system access points compromised on schedule. Recommend advancing timeline for Phase 2 containment protocols. Chen's blood froze. Subject 7. The figure tilted their head, as though listening to a response piped directly into their ears. Then they continued walking, heading directly toward the damaged vent grate, where Chen had been kneeling minutes earlier. His pulse thundered so loudly, he was sure it would give him away. He clung to the wall, praying the shadows would keep him hidden. The figure stopped at the grate. Slowly, almost tenderly, they ran long fingers along the twisted steel. Their posture was not angry or afraid, it was something stranger, almost affectionate. "Poor thing," they murmured. Their voice had a layered quality, as though two notes played at once, one human and one from somewhere deeper. So eager to explore, so hungry for freedom. Chen's lungs burned from holding his breath. He did not dare move. At that moment, the figure shifted slightly, tilting their head toward the light, and Chen saw their eyes. Not human eyes, not even close. The pupils were vertical slits, thin and reptilian, gleaming with a golden sheen that caught the red light and threw it back in unnatural shimmer. When the angle shifted, the gold refracted into green and bronze, like molten metal swirling beneath glass. No contact lens could mimic that, no medical condition could explain it. These were the eyes of something that had evolved in darkness, something that belonged in this underground maze. Chen's mouth went dry. He clamped his teeth together to stop a sound from escaping. The figure lingered at the grate a moment longer, almost whispering to it, as though addressing the unseen presence in the ducts. Then, without a backward glance, they continued down the corridor, their footsteps fading into the labyrinth. Chen waited. 10 minutes, maybe more, pressed to the wall, unmoving. Only when silence reclaimed the hallway did he dare to move, his muscles screaming from tension. Every fiber of him wanted to bolt to the elevator, to slam the button until it carried him back to the false safety of level 6. But he forced himself to walk, quiet and careful. The red glow seemed thicker now, the shadows more animate, stretching like fingers. And through it all, the hum, deep, organic, resonant thrum through the walls, vibrating in his chest like a second heartbeat. As he crept back toward his quarters, another sound joined the hum. At first, Chen thought it was the ducks again, the strange whispers of air and steel. But no, this was more deliberate. A hiss, soft and rhythmic, threading through the ventilation system. At first it sounded random, but as he strained to listen, patterns emerged. The hiss was not meaningless. It was language. Not a language he knew. Not any language of Earth. But it had cadence, structure. The sound of something practicing, learning, rehearsing. He stumbled into his room and slammed the door shut behind him, his breath ragged. He leaned against the concrete wall, feeling its chill against his back. But even here, in his quarters, the whispers continued, bleeding through the ducts, brushing against his ears like something alive. He sat at the desk, staring at the fake painted window as though it might anchor him to sanity. Mountains that did not exist, sky that was not real, and behind him, in the vents, voices that were not human. That night, sleep was impossible. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw those golden, slit pupil eyes glinting in the red light. Every time he shifted, he heard the whispering hiss, arranging itself into syllables just beyond comprehension. For the first time in his career, David Chen realized the problem was not a technical issue. It was not airflow or humidity or faulty machinery. The ventilation system was not broken. It was occupied. The cafeteria on level 6 was silent, unnaturally so. Chen had eaten in countless government mess halls before, from missile silos in the Dakotas to biological research outposts buried under Nevada sand. Normally, even in secure facilities, cafeterias had noise cutlery clattering, conversations kept low but steady, the background hum of ordinary human routine. Here, however, the silence was absolute. The few staff members present hunched over their meals like prisoners, chewing without speaking, eyes fixed on trays, as though even a stray glance might betray them. Chen spotted Morrison in the corner, clutching a mug of coffee gone cold long ago. His hands trembled so violently the liquid inside rippled like an unsteady pond. Chen sat opposite him, without asking permission. "We need to talk," Chen said quietly. Morrison did not look up. His hollow eyes stayed fixed on the table. "How's your assessment progressing?" His voice was flat, brittle. "That depends," Chen countered. He leaned in, lowering his voice to a whisper. "It depends on whether you can tell me what Subject 7 is." The words hit Morrison like a physical blow. The color drained from his face. His cup rattled against the table as he set it down with trembling fingers. His gaze darted across the cafeteria, scanning the room with panicked urgency. None of the other staff looked up, but Chen could see it now. They were listening without listening. Every one of them on edge, trained to avoid eye contact, trained to pretend. "Not here," Morrison hissed, finally raising his eyes to Chen's. "Not where they can't hear." "Then where?" "Maintenance Bay 3. 1 hour." Morrison rose abruptly, leaving his coffee abandoned on the table, and disappeared down the corridor without another word. Chen waited. He forced himself to chew tasteless food, to swallow the anxiety rising in his throat. The other staff remained silent, each of them wearing the same haunted look. He felt like he was sitting in a theater where everyone knew the play, but refused to speak their lines. An hour later, he found Morrison pacing inside Maintenance Bay 3, a cavernous room filled with humming backup generators and water treatment units. The space smelled of oil and ozone. Morrison looked older now, as if the years had caught up to him all at once. Deep lines carved his face. His shoulders sagged. "How much do you know about this facility's history?" Morrison asked without preamble. Chen shrugged. "Just what I read in my briefing. DOE-DOD joint operation. Established in the 1980s. Advanced energy research." Morrison barked out a laugh, humorless and sharp. "Energy research. That is what they tell the contractors. That is what they told me too." He gestured toward a bank of monitors mounted on the wall. The screens were not showing airflow or pressure data like Chen expected. Instead, they pulsed with lines of biological readings, heart rates, neural activity, metabolic outputs. None of them matched human physiology. The numbers were too fast, too irregular, too alien. In 1979, Morrison continued, his voice dropping. Contact was made. Not the kind people imagine with flying saucers and little green men. No, what they found was older, deeper, already here, living under our feet long before the first atom bomb, maybe long before the first stone tool. Chen felt his stomach tighten. You are telling me these readings are not human? They are not. Morrison tapped one of the monitors with a shaking finger. The data spiked and dipped in unnatural waves. For the first few years, we thought it was cooperation. They gave us technology leaps in computing, in medicine, in physics. We gave them resources. What kind of resources? Chen asked, though dread already whispered the answer. Genetic material, biological samples, and later Morrison's voice cracked. Later, we gave them people. The silence that followed was heavier than any sound could have been. Morrison moved to another console, pulling up a schematic. The blueprint Chen had studied in his quarters only showed levels 1 through 9. This schematic went deeper, much deeper. Levels 10 through 14 stretched almost a quarter mile into the earth. Beyond that, the image flickered with unreadable data, corrupted or encrypted. This facility does not end at 9, Morrison said grimly. Those levels you were told about, that is a mask. The real work happens below. Breeding programs, integration protocols, experiments. Levels 6 through 9 are the buffer, the place where contractors like you are shuffled in and out so they can maintain the illusion. Chen stared at the glowing schematic, his mouth dry. And Subject 7. Morrison's eyes flicked toward another screen. It displayed biological data, unlike anything Chen had ever seen. The numbers spiked wildly, oscillating like a predator's heartbeat quickening. Subject 7 is different, Morrison whispered. Older, smarter. It has been here since before the agreement, and it does not want to stay contained anymore. Chen's skin crawled as Morrison went on. 3 weeks ago, ventilation problems began. That is when 7 started moving, testing defenses, pushing against its walls, using your ducts to travel. His voice faltered. Yesterday, we lost contact with the team on level 9. Today, there is nothing from level 8 either. As though on cue, the biological monitors beeped sharply. Heart rate surged. Neural patterns spasmed. Every line spiked upward in perfect synchronization. They know we are talking about them, Morrison whispered, stepping back from the screens. His face drained of blood. They always know. And then, without warning, the facility lights went out. For one suffocating heartbeat, there was nothing, no light, no hum of machines, only the sound of their own ragged breathing and the sudden, crushing weight of silence. Then, with a violent click, the backup systems kicked in. The maintenance bay was drenched in red emergency light, transforming the concrete walls into a hellscape of shadows. The air itself seemed to thicken. Chen and Morrison froze. Neither spoke. Both listened. At first it was subtle, the soft groan of steel straining overhead. Then came the unmistakable sound of metal twisting, bending. The ventilation grates above them rattled, their bolts shrieking as if enormous hands or claws pressed against them from the inside. Chen's eyes shot upward. The grate directly above them bulged outward. Something was in the ductwork, pressing against the barrier. The steel screamed as it bent. It is here, Morrison whispered, his voice hoarse. A shadow passed behind the grate, blotting out the red light. For an instant, Chen caught it in fragments, a golden shimmer, the unmistakable curve of an eye watching them. It was not just looking, it was studying them. The monitors behind them erupted in frantic beeping. Biological readouts spiked into impossible ranges, synchronized as if every creature in the lower levels had been jolted awake. The numbers moved in harmony, like heartbeats beating together. Morrison staggered back from the screens. They are all listening. Not just 7. All of them. The grate groaned again. Then, with a shriek of tearing metal, it buckled inward. Chen's flashlight beam darted up, cutting through the red gloom. For an instant, he saw the thing pressing against the vent. Pale flesh stretched taut over long, sinewy muscle, veins glowing faintly with that eerie blue-green bioluminescence. And the eye golden, vertical pupil, unblinking, full of intelligence too ancient and too cold to be human. He dropped the flashlight, and the beam clattered wildly across the floor. A sound followed, wet, sliding, organic. The creature moved inside the ductwork like a serpent, dragging itself with impossible grace. And then it spoke. The voice came not from the vent, but from everywhere at once. The walls, the floor, the air itself seemed to vibrate with words. David Morrison, 37 years of service. Cardiovascular weakness. 2 children, Sarah and Michael. Wife died in the accident we arranged in 1998. Morrison gasped as though struck. No, that was an accident, the police said. We required your cooperation, the voice replied, toneless and cruel. Emotional leverage is the most effective method. Chen felt cold spread through his body. This thing knew everything: names, histories, tragedies. It was not just inside the ducts. It was inside their lives. And you, James Chen, the voice continued, slithering around the edges of the bay. Electronics engineer. Recently divorced. Daughter at Stanford. Rebecca. Promising future. Such a fragile skull. Chen's blood turned to ice. His daughter, how could it know? What do you want? Chen forced the words past his dry throat. The same thing we have always wanted. Cooperation. Understanding. Evolution. The sound shifted, circling them. The shadows flickered with movement. Chen felt breath against his neck too hot, smelling faintly of copper and sulfur. He spun, but Morrison caught his arm. Don't look at it, Morrison hissed. That is how it gets in your head. But it was too late. Chen had already glimpsed it. The creature dropped from the vent like a nightmare birthed into flesh. It stood unfolded onto the concrete floor. 7 feet tall, roughly human in silhouette, but distorted, wrong in ways that made the brain ache to comprehend. Its skin was translucent, rivers of glowing veins running beneath. Its face was almost human, but elongated, stretched, wrong, with those golden eyes that reflected the red emergency light like a predator's gaze. And when it smiled, revealing teeth that were too sharp and too numerous, Chen understood instantly why Morrison had begged him not to look. This was not an alien visitor. It was not a scientific specimen. It was a predator that had worn the mask of cooperation for 40 years. The red light flickered. In strobing flashes, Chen saw it circling them, its form shifting subtly, its edges refusing to stay fixed in space. Sometimes it was tall, sometimes impossibly elongated, as if space itself warped around its presence. The monitors behind them went silent, every reading flatlining at once. Not dead, but waiting, listening. Then the voice came again, low and intimate. Now you choose. The silence after its words was unbearable. Even the hum of machinery seemed to have died. Chen stood frozen, the red glow strobing across his vision as the creature circled just beyond the limits of clarity. He felt it watching him from every direction at once, as though the walls themselves had grown eyes. Morrison broke first. His voice cracked, barely above a whisper. Don't answer it, Chen. Don't give it anything. But Chen's throat was already tightening with dread, because the creature had spoken Rebecca's name. His daughter's face flashed before his eyes, her dark hair falling over stacks of textbooks, her smile as she told him she would been accepted into Stanford's pre-med program. She was his anchor, the only pure thing left after a broken marriage and decades of secrets. And now this. Thing new about her. You leave her out of this, Chen managed, his voice shaking with both fury and fear. The golden eyes gleamed. You misunderstand. She is already in this. Your species is useful only when leveraged. Family, grief, fear. These are the instruments of your cooperation. And you, James Chen, will cooperate. I won't, Chen spat, though the tremor in his voice betrayed him. Yes, you will. The voice was calm, patient, inevitable. Morrison resisted once too. We made arrangements. Morrison's face crumpled. His hands shook violently now, not from age or illness, but from memory. Linda, he whispered, his wife's name breaking from his lips like a confession. The creature tilted its head, almost mocking. Her accident ensured your silence for 25 years. Efficient. Necessary. You lived, your children lived, because you obeyed. Until now. Chen's stomach twisted. They had not just killed Morrison's wife, they had staged it, calculated it, used it as leverage, which meant Rebecca's future was nothing but a thread in their web, one they could cut whenever they chose. The creature stepped closer. Its form shimmered, space bending around it like heat distortion. Chen tried not to look, but his eyes betrayed him. He caught its smile again, too wide, too sharp, and felt a pressure at the edges of his thoughts, like fingers made of cold water slipping through his memories. He clenched his fists, fighting it, but the pressure grew stronger. His most private images surfaced unbidden. Rebecca at 10, proudly showing him her science fair project. Rebecca at 16, holding her driver's license up to the sun. Rebecca at 18, waving from her dorm room window as he drove away. Such a lovely girl. The voice coiled inside his mind. Such a fragile skull. Chen's knees nearly gave out. Rage flared, but fear smothered it. What do you want? His voice cracked under the weight of the question. What we have always wanted. Partnership. Integration. Evolution. The words pulsed, resonating through his bones. Your species has served as caretakers long enough. Now it is time for the next phase. You will help us, James Chen, or your daughter will be the first to fall. Beside him, Morrison could take no more. No, he snarled, his trembling hands fumbling with the electrical panel. Not again. Not this time. The red glow flickered, and the creature's form blurred forward with impossible speed. There was no scream, not really, only a wet, choked gasp as Morrison was yanked off his feet and hurled against the far wall. His body hit the concrete with a sickening crack. Chen staggered backward, his chest heaving. Morrison lay crumpled, eyes rolled white, blue-green fluid seeping from punctures in his neck. He twitched once, then went still. The creature turned back to Chen, its golden eyes burning like twin suns. Do not repeat his mistake. His children will join us soon, regardless. But your daughter, her future still depends on you. Chen's whole body trembled. He wanted to scream, to fight, to die rather than bow to this thing. But the image of Rebecca alive, laughing, untouched held him back. He forced his head to nod. I will. Cooperate. The golden eyes narrowed, satisfied. Good. The question is not whether you will cooperate, James Chen. The question is how completely. And with those words, the thing stepped back into the shadows. The humming in the walls deepened, as if the entire facility had exhaled in unison. Chen knew then that Morrison had been right. They did not see humans as equals. They saw them as livestock, tools, breeding stock. And now, he was no longer just an engineer. He was a prisoner, tethered to their will by the single thread of his daughter's life. The creature called itself Administrator. At least, that was the word it allowed Chen to use. The name felt hollow, a placeholder for something that did not translate into human language. After Morrison's death, Chen expected interrogation or confinement, but instead, Administrator beckoned him to follow. And he obeyed, because he knew he had no choice. The corridor beyond the maintenance bay was unlike any space Chen had seen in his 23 years of classified work. It was not concrete or steel. The walls pulsed faintly, glowing with blue-green veins of light that seemed almost alive, like bioluminescence trapped in flowing water. They stretched downward, curving in ways that hurt the eyes, bending geometry itself. Chen touched one wall as he passed. It was warm, slightly yielding, like pressing a hand to skin. He pulled away instantly, bile rising in his throat. 17 levels, Administrator said as they walked, its voice reverberating from everywhere at once. Your government believes there are 3. They understand only what we permit them to see. Chen's breathing was shallow, 17. What is on the deeper levels? Administrators' golden eyes reflected the glow. Research, breeding, integration, the foundation of your future. They passed a row of observation windows, each one reinforced with thick glass. Against every instinct, Chen looked inside. The first chamber resembled a laboratory, but its instruments were not human. Organic machinery writhed and pulsed, grown rather than built. In the center, a tank of viscous fluid held a shape almost but not quite human. Its limbs floated, too long, its head too large. Tubes connected its body to the walls, like an umbilical cord. Monitors pulsed with alien readings, none matching human norms. In another chamber, Chen saw rows of smaller tanks. Inside each floated something different. Hybrid infants, their skulls elongated, their tiny hands twitching in unnatural rhythm. Their eyes, half-formed, glowed faintly gold even in the liquid darkness. Chen staggered back from the window, gagging. Administrator did not pause. The hybrid offspring show remarkable potential, stronger than baseline humans, more intelligent, better adapted to atmospheric changes that will accompany transition. Transition, Chen croaked. The creature tilted its head. Surface deployment. The change cannot happen overnight. Infrastructure must remain intact. Social disruption minimized. Hybrids will replace key personnel gradually: government, military, corporate. Within a generation, the process will be complete. Chen stared at the writhing shadows behind the glass. His stomach churned, not just with fear, but with the dawning realization that this was not science fiction, it was colonization by erosion, a replacement so slow and subtle humanity would not realize until it was already done. "Why show me this?" Chen asked, voice breaking. Administrator's slit-pupiled eyes glinted with something between amusement and contempt. "Because you will play a role. Your expertise in electronics and communication systems is required for the next phase. You will help us integrate with human infrastructure. Your cooperation ensures your daughter's continued survival." The word survival burned. Rebecca's face returned in his mind, bright and hopeful. He swallowed hard, every fiber of him screaming to resist, but he could already feel the leash tightening around his neck. They descended further, the air growing colder, metallic. The corridor opened into a vast observation deck overlooking what could only be described as a city beneath the earth. Chen gasped aloud. The cavern stretched beyond comprehension, lit by glowing pools and bioluminescent growths that pulsed like veins of a colossal organism. Structure sprawled across the floor, part architecture, part living tissue, fused into shapes the human brain struggled to parse. Steam hissed from vents. Shadows moved through the haze. At first Chen thought they were people, but as his eyes adjusted, he saw the truth. Hundreds of figures marched below, organized, purposeful. Too tall, too fluid in their movements, limbs bending at angles that defied human joints. And every one of them bore the unmistakable golden gleam of hybrid eyes. Administrator stood beside him, almost proud. The primary colony. 40 years of careful development. Soon, they will be ready. Chen's voice was hoarse. Ready for what? The creature's smile widened. To inherit your world. The words echoed in Chen's mind long after they left the observation deck. His daughter's laughter, the painted window in his quarters, the whispers in the ducts, all of it shrank beneath the weight of this revelation. This was not just about Dulce. This was not just about him. It was about humanity being phased out, one generation at a time. The days that followed blurred into one another, though days meant little underground. Chen no longer saw sunrises, no shifting sky, only the artificial cycle of lights and the unyielding hum of alien machinery that pulsed like the heartbeat of something alive. His life became a regimented loop, escorted by silent hybrids in lab coats, brought to laboratories that bent reality, and forced to work until his hands cramped and his eyes stung. Administrator called it collaboration. To Chen, it was servitude under a predator's leash. The laboratories were not filled with the familiar consoles or tools of human science. Instead, the workstations grew out of the walls, half metal, half flesh. their surfaces warm to the touch. Screens did not flicker so much as breathe, shifting colors and patterns that adapted to the user's thoughts. Cables pulsed faintly, carrying fluid as much as current. Chen recoiled the first time he laid a hand on one, but administrator's voice reminded him quiet, patient, cruel that Rebecca was always within reach. "You will refine our neural interfaces," administrator instructed. "They must learn to communicate with human networks seamlessly. No resistance, no trace." At first, Chen tried to resist. He sabotaged small things, misaligned connections, deliberate miscalculations in algorithms. But the hybrids noticed instantly. His corrections were erased within hours, and each failure was followed by punishment not on him, but in the form of veiled reminders. A photo of Rebecca walking across campus, unaware of the eyes on her. A video feed of her studying in the library, and once, a chilling glimpse of the hybrid assigned to shadow her. A young man who looked utterly human until he passed a glass window, and his reflection showed something with elongated limbs and eyes that glowed faint gold. It broke Chen. He realized sabotage would only draw their wrath faster. So he shifted strategy. If he could not refuse, he would work, but he would work carefully, planting a seed invisible even to them. Every day, he was tasked with improving the neural interfaces, devices that allowed hybrids to connect directly with human digital systems. Administrator described them as keys to your kingdom. The interfaces were elegant in their terror, organic circuits meshed with human-like processors, allowing hybrids to sift through terabytes of human communication with thought-speed efficiency. Social media, cell towers, government servers, all would be laid bare once the system was perfected. "You humans built the perfect surveillance machine for yourselves," administrator said one morning as Chen's trembling hands completed another calibration. "Phones, networks, cameras. We will simply claim what you have already made. You enslaved yourselves long before we came." Chen nodded, silent, but his mind worked furiously. He saw a vulnerability buried in the very sophistication of their system. Their quantum entangled communication lattice allowed instantaneous coordination across vast distances. But like all lattices, it could resonate. Too much feedback, the wrong kind of interference, could collapse it into chaos. It was a crack in their armor, a flaw they had not noticed. Or perhaps they believed no human could understand well enough to exploit it. Chen resolved to prove them wrong. Quietly, invisibly, he began embedding a backdoor into the code. On the surface, the interface looked perfect, its efficiency unmatched. But deep inside, he hid a fragment of self-replicating virus, dormant until triggered by a precise sequence. If activated, it could send the entire lattice into feedback, disrupting their coordination for hours, maybe days. It was a slim chance, but slim was better than none. The work was grueling. 16-hour cycles bent over alien consoles, the hum of organic machines filling his skull. Sometimes, between tasks, Chen caught glimpses of other labs. Tanks where hybrids floated, their eyes glowing faintly in nutrient fluid. Human captives strapped to beds, their minds probed by devices that hissed with static. Once, he passed a chamber where a hybrid surgeon calmly carved symbols into the skin of a still-living subject, recording their neural responses with scientific detachment. He forced himself not to react. Administrator had warned him, emotion betrays you. Remember, the colony watches. But at night, or what passed for night alone in his quarters, Chen would collapse at his desk, trembling as the painted window mocked him with its fake daylight. He would stare at the terminal glowing with research logs, reading the words project integration over and over until they blurred into meaninglessness. Lists of names filled the files, missing persons, scientists, soldiers, all siphoned into the program. And among them, under a section marked leverage assets, was Rebecca. Her name reduced to a tool. It fueled him. It gave him reason to keep writing his hidden code, even as exhaustion aided his sanity. For 3 weeks, Chen lived as their prisoner and their engineer. He gave them what they demanded, perfecting their interface, all while feeding the virus that might one day burn their network from within. But even in this nightmare, a strange ally emerged. During one long session calibrating neural circuits, Chen felt something brush against his thoughts, not administrator, not the invasive probes of hybrids, but something subtler. A whisper. It was not words at first, more like static arranging itself into meaning. Then faintly a plea. "Help me." Chen froze. The voice was not administrator's. It was not alien. It was human. It came again, faint but clear inside his mind. I remember being human." Chen looked up, scanning the lab. His eyes landed on a tank across the chamber. Inside floated a hybrid, larger than the others, its elongated skull tilted as though watching him. Its golden eyes glowed faintly, and for an instant, Chen swore he saw something else flicker in them: desperation. "Please," the voice whispered in his skull. "Kill me before they use me." Chen's blood turned cold. The hybrids were not just breeding humans, they were remaking them, fusing them into something else. And at least one of those creations still remembered what it used to be. The laboratory's air was thick with humidity and the faint tang of ozone. Chen stood frozen, staring at the tank. Inside floated what had once been a human being. The creature's elongated skull and pale, translucent skin marked it as hybrid, but its eyes, glowing faintly gold through the viscous fluid, were alive with something administrator had not accounted for. They were pleading. The voice returned, a whisper sliding directly into Chen's skull, bypassing his ears. "Please, help me. Kill me." Chen staggered back, his breath catching in his throat. He pressed his palms to his temples, certain he was hallucinating from stress. But the words came again, sharper this time. "I remember being human. I can't stop them, but I still feel everything. Please." Administrator's voice cut across the chamber, smooth and clinical. Third-generation hybrid with full neural enhancement, it explained, as if Chen were observing a machine rather than a person drowned in alien fluid. Capable of direct interface with any electronic system, immune to most human weapons, atmospherically adaptive, loyal to our cause. Chen's mouth worked, but no words came. Loyal, that voice in his head did not sound loyal. It sounded trapped, tortured. The hybrid in the tank pressed one long hand against the glass. Patterns of light rippled across the surface, sharp and geometric, like a code that hurt Chen's eyes to follow. "Please, I can still think. They left me inside. Kill me before they erase me." Chen felt bile rise in his throat. He stumbled closer, pressing his hand against the glass opposite the hybrids. A barrier separated them, but the desperation in its gaze bridged it. Administrator noticed his reaction and drifted closer, its voice curling like smoke around Chen's mind. "You are distressed. Understandable. The enhancement process is unsettling to the uninitiated. But consider the benefits. No aging, no disease, no fear of death." It paused, golden eyes gleaming. "Your daughter could undergo the process voluntarily. Think of the future we could offer her." The suggestion was casual, but it landed like a knife. Chen's chest constricted with rage so sharp he nearly lashed out physically. The thought of Rebecca Bright, curious, human transformed into this imprisoned horror, was unbearable. For a moment, his mask slipped. Rage surged through him, a father's instinct overriding all reason. He took a step toward Administrator, his fists clenched. The creature's golden eyes narrowed, sensing his defiance, and the cold pressure of its probing fingers slid back into his thoughts. "Ah," it murmured softly. "Protective instinct. Understandable, but ultimately irrelevant. Evolution requires sacrifice, James Chen. The question is whether that sacrifice will be willing or forced." Chen clenched his jaw, forcing himself to breathe, forcing himself not to give away the defiance burning inside. He thought of the hidden virus he would been planting in their systems, the quiet sabotage buried in the lattice. He could not reveal his hand too soon. Not here. Not while Rebecca's life was still a blade at his throat. They left the chamber, but the hybrid's voice followed him. "Don't give up. You can hurt them. I will help you." Back in his quarters, Chen collapsed onto the desk. His hand shook so violently he could barely hold a pen, but he scrawled notes anyway: schematics, fragments of the virus code, desperate plans etched into the margins of facility logs. His quarters were monitored, of course, but he disguised his notes as calculations for ventilation and airflow. Sleep never came. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw the hybrid's face pressed to the glass, its silent scream echoing in his skull. The next morning, Administrator escorted him to yet another laboratory. Chen went through the motions, refining the neural interfaces, embedding the virus deeper into the code. He answered their questions with calm professionalism, never betraying the truth bubbling beneath the surface. But inside, the line had been crossed. They could threaten him. They could hold Rebecca hostage. They could force him to labor for their evolution. But after hearing that telepathic plea, after realizing that their breeding program was not just erasing people, but trapping their consciousness inside warped bodies, Chen's fear hardened into something else: resolve. If he was going to die here, he would not die as their tool. He would die burning their lattice to the ground. For 3 more days, Chen lived the illusion of obedience. He adjusted their neural interfaces, polished their algorithms, and delivered progress reports that earned him curt nods of approval from Administrator. But behind every keystroke, he planted seeds. The virus was ready now, woven into their lattice like a cancer. It only needed a trigger. The problem was not the code, it was access. To infect their entire quantum communication array, Chen needed to reach the central node buried in the lowest levels, the deepest chamber, the beating heart of the integration network. Administrator had not shown him that far yet, but the whispering hybrid in the tank had. Lower levels, it murmured into his mind at night, when the facility lights dimmed and silence stretched like a noose. Follow the conduits. Security cycles every 16 minutes. The guards do not see everything. Hurry. Chen was not sure if it was real or if stress had cracked his mind, but the details that fed him matched what he observed: patrol timings, blind spots in surveillance, access codes hidden in maintenance logs. Whether ally or hallucination, he had no choice but to trust it. On the 4th night, he made his move. The facility's artificial cycle dimmed, bathing level 6 in its perpetual red emergency glow. Most staff retreated to their quarters, the hallways left to automated patrol drones. Chen slipped from his room, heart hammering, and followed the path the hybrid had described. The corridors deepened into places he had never seen. Past level 9, the concrete gave way to walls that pulsed faintly with their own light, veins glowing in organic rhythms. The air grew colder, metallic, and carried a faint static that made his teeth ache. He passed chambers filled with failed experiments, grotesque shapes that might once have been human, now warped beyond recognition. Some still twitched. Others stared with eyes that glowed faintly even in death. He forced himself not to stop. Finally, he entered a vast chamber at the very bottom. The communication array was like nothing human hands could have built. A cathedral of light and flesh, cables thicker than trees spiraling upward into darkness, their surfaces alive with flowing currents of blue-green energy. Screens and panels glowed with alien script. The lattice hummed, a resonance that seemed to vibrate inside his skull. This was at the core of their network, linking Dulce to facilities across the world. Chen's hands shook as he accessed the terminal. Alien symbols shifted, but his modifications from weeks of work gave him a back door. The interface adapted to him, almost eager to be touched. He began typing, uploading the virus hidden in the folds of their code. At first, nothing happened. Then the screens flickered, patterns distorted, currents of light within the cables faltered, then surged wildly. Across the lattice, the resonance shifted into chaos. For the first time, their network was bleeding. Alarm screamed through the chamber, shrill and metallic. Red strobes cut across the cathedral, bathing it in frantic light. Chen's virus raced outward, carried along their quantum entanglement, spreading not just here, but to every linked node across the planet. Yes, the hybrid's voice whispered in his skull. They feel it. You have cut them open. Chen did not stop. He triggered the release of data. He would gathered research logs, schematics, Lists of names dumping them into external servers, social media backdoors, watchdog networks. Most people would dismiss it as fiction, but some would see. Some would question. That was enough. Behind him, the chamber doors opened with a hiss. Administrator stepped through. Its golden eyes blazed with fury, its form shimmering at the edges as though space itself warped around it. The air thickened, pressing against Chen's chest. His fingers froze on the console. "You delay the inevitable," Administrator said, its voice deeper now, vibrating his bones. "The integration will continue, and your daughter will pay the price for your foolishness." Chen turned slowly. His fear was gone, replaced by something steadier. "Maybe," he said. His voice surprised him with its calm. "But now people will be watching. Now they will know what to look for." Administrator tilted its head, those golden eyes narrowing into slits. "Hope is irrelevant." But Chen had already seen the chaos ripple through the lattice. He knew he would bought time. A crack in their armor. A seed of doubt for humanity. As the chamber shook with alarms and the lattice spasmed in its death throes, Chen realized he might not escape. But escape was not the point anymore. He had given humanity something it had not had in 40 years. A chance. "I should be dead. By all official accounts, I am." The cover story said there'd been an industrial accident in the Dulce facility. An electrical fire. Lower levels destroyed. My body unrecoverable. The Department of Energy filed the paperwork. My colleagues mourned me, and my family buried an empty casket. To the world, James Chen ceased to exist in November of 2019. But I did not die. The virus I unleashed threw their network into disarray, just long enough to escape in the chaos. I can't explain how I barely remember it myself. Sirens howled. The facility groaned like a living thing tearing itself apart, and Administrator's golden eyes burned into me as I fled. Somehow, I reached a surface exit, staggered into the desert night, and disappeared into the world above. I have been running ever since. For 15 years, I have lived under names not my own. Cheap motels, back roads, burner phones. Never staying anywhere more than a few months. Always scanning faces in crowds, watching for the wrong angle of a smile, the glint of golden eyes in the dark. Rebecca thinks her father died a hero killed while repairing critical infrastructure. She keeps my photo in her office now, a pediatric surgeon in San Francisco, saving lives just like she always dreamed. She does not know that the same inhuman things that manipulated me are still watching her. Sometimes, when I can't sleep, I wonder if she is already under their surveillance if one of her colleagues, or even one of her patient's parents, is one of them wearing human skin. The integration slowed after my virus disrupted their systems. But it did not stop. They adapt. They always adapt. I see the signs everywhere. Technology leaping forward too fast, always in directions that favor surveillance and control. Political leaders who wake up one day colder, sharper, less human in their decisions. Corporations consolidating power with ruthless efficiency. Missing scientists. Missing soldiers. People who vanish into the dark and are never spoken of again. I have tried to warn others. Journalists. Politicians. Activists. Most dismiss me as a lunatic, a conspiracy theorist clinging to trauma. A few listen, even nod gravely, but then they change. Their emails go unanswered, their faces turn blank, and I never hear from them again. Sometimes I wonder if those are the ones who got too close, pulled under by the colony below. And then there is the voice. It never left me. The hybrid in the tank, the one who remembered being human, still whispers into my mind. Sometimes it is fragments, warnings I do not understand until weeks later. Sometimes it is clearer, descriptions of new facilities, maps of underground chambers, glimpses of experiments I wish I could erase from memory. I do not know if it is truly an ally or just another layer of manipulation, but it is all I have. Lately, the whispers have grown urgent. They are moving again, building faster, preparing for surface deployment. I feel them closing in. I know they have never stopped hunting me. Every time I connect to a network, no matter how carefully, I feel their lattice searching. Every time I buy a bus ticket or check into a motel, I wonder if I have left too much of a trail. This may be the last chance I have to speak. You asked yourself once if humanity was alone in the universe. The truth is worse. We were never alone. And the ones who share this planet with us, they do not see us as equals. They see us as livestock. I know how it sounds. I know you want to dismiss this as paranoia, as the ramblings of a broken mind. Maybe you are right. Maybe I imagined everything in that desert labyrinth. Maybe David Morrison really did die in an electrical accident, and my memories are just trauma stitched together into a nightmare. But if that is true, answer me this. Why are people vanishing, thousands every year, without a trace? Why do our leaders and CEOs sometimes seem different, as though a mask is slipped, but no one else notices? Why do our greatest technological advances always serve control more than freedom? Watch the people around you. Look closer at the ones who do not quite blink at the right time, whose reflections seem off, whose warmth is missing. Because the replacement has already begun. And if you are hearing this now, you are already part of it.